Welcome to Leader You by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Thank you for listening to the Leader You podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a dear friend of mine, Mr. Jeff Hough. I am going to tee this up in a way that I kind of talk about a little bit about what we're going to talk about in the podcast. But really, what we're going to do is we're going to share our personal stories in the podcast. And Jeff is a friend of mine that I've had for a few years, and we have been alongside each other on our leadership journey for these past couple years. And we've been sharing our wins and our losses. We've been sharing our self-limiting beliefs. We've grown tremendously by going through this whole process of discovery. And we've been vulnerable in our sharing and our openness and willingness to work on ourselves as a whole person, and not just the surface level stuff. So it is really a challenging process when you have to look in the mirror and realize that you might need to be the one to change. And that once you change, then everything else can change for the better. So that's the process that Jeff and I have been going down, is learning where it is that we need to change. And some of the lessons that come up in the podcasts that we do, we have 2 podcasts, but 2 of them, I really think that one of the messages that sticks out to me is how the joy is in the journey and it's not in the destination. And because there's always another mountain in front of us that we need to climb. And our culture has us chasing the wrong kinds of happiness. And you really can't pin your happiness on a moment or time or a significant event. Because if you do, you'll just continue to chase and chase and chase. And that is unfulfilling and unsustainable. So it's really slowing down and recognizing and being present in the moment and being all that you can be in the moments that you have. And it really is scary to acknowledge that maybe it's you that need to change. And many people don't want to hear that. Not a lot of people do. It's much easier to blame other people and to complain than it is to get to work on yourself. So in the podcast, Jeff and I really discuss how important it is for you to open your mind to this and to discover where you are limiting yourself and where you need to heal. And once you can do that, then a whole new world will open up to you, and that is rich and full of possibilities and opportunities that you would maybe have never seen before. And listen, we aren't asking you to do anything that we haven't done ourselves. It's very challenging work, and it's courageous work to actually face yourself and get sick of your own self-limiting beliefs and your own excuses and your own justifications. It's really hard to hold that mirror up and to do that. But I will tell you, once you do it, you won't regret it. So I'm hoping that what you will do is listen to these 2 podcasts and take some notes. And maybe listen to them a couple of times, because there is so much richness and depth in these, for us sharing our openness and vulnerability of what we've had to overcome. And when you're doing that, remember that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And maybe you aren't the student. Maybe it's someone you know who's struggling in life right now. Who do you know that could benefit from this podcast? Can you do something meaningful, like share the podcast with them and ask them if they'd be open, or tell them that you thought about them when you heard this because you know they're struggling? Can you do something meaningful like that and share the podcast with them and tell them that you thought of them and that you believe in them? Maybe they need someone to believe in them until they can believe in themselves. So I'm going to ask you to be that person for someone else and to be that person for yourself. And I hope that you really get out of these 2 podcasts that are going to be back to back, that really talk about leading from the inside out and learning how to deal with your whole self as a person, not just the surface things that we in society are looking at that are all externally based. We're talking about diving under the surface of the iceberg, all the stuff that you can't see. All the stuff that you can see, let's call that the external stuff, and everything under the water, that is the depth and the soul and the person that we're dealing with, that all of us have our own baggage that we need to really tap into. So I hope these 2 podcasts are really helpful for you, and that some of you are willing to do some of that work and face yourself. And hopefully our vulnerability in sharing the work that we've had to do, even as leaders ourselves, people have been on the planet over 50 years. We don't have it all figured out. In fact, that's part of the joy in the journey, is knowing that we're learning and growing every day. And the person you are today can be completely different 1 year from now if you start to do this work. So remember, I can't want this more than you do. And I'm hoping that you can share this podcast and that this will be an impact to you or someone that you love. So thank you again for listening, and I hope you enjoy it. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you for joining us on the Leader You podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of having my guest, Jeff Hough, again for the second episode where, well, it's actually his third episode, but this is the second one where we're talking about what's next for him, what's exciting and new in his life, and we're going to talk about the whole person, right?
The whole person.
The whole person.
I love it. The whole person.
Yeah. So on our last podcast, we caught up about what has happened over the past 2 years since I had Jeff on the podcast when he was the second guest, The Joy is in the Journey. I highly recommend you listen to that. And then the previous one of this, part 1, where we just talked about how much we've grown in the past 2 years, and we shared our stories, our insights and wisdom, and just really great podcast with lots of gems in it that I hope you will listen to. But today we're going to discuss the whole person and what Jeff means by the whole person from the inside out.
From the inside out. Well, thanks for having me back a third time.
Yeah.
This is so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm back, but the whole person the whole leader is a concept I came up with a few months ago. I was sitting down just trying to go, how do we bridge the gap between the young leaders coming up and the older leaders that are getting ready to leave? And how do we deal with that with context of the things that I'm learning and that I truly believe make a difference in leadership now? And I came up with what I call the whole leader, WHOLE, leader. And of course, every letter is an acronym, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the first letter, whole, is W, which stands for well, meaning you understand who you are, what you are, where you came from. The next one, H, is humble, because I don't think you can be a good leader without having some humility to do things, to be vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
to be open to say, you know, I made a mistake, or I don't have all the answers, things like that. O stands for open. I'm willing to listen and be open to things.
Mm-hmm.
And L stands for listening. And we talked about this in the last episode, but being able to listen without myself, because so often in business, you can hear people say, well, I tried that 3 years ago and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that might be true, but we have a whole different set of variables today. So let's listen and
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
and be open. And the last one, which I think is missing, especially in the older school leaders, is E, standing for empowering.
Mm-hmm.
And empowering, you can't fully empower your team unless you understand who you are and are comfortable with that and all the other things down the line. So whole builds on itself to allow me to empower those around me.
I love it. So how are you? Well, I know you have a mastermind, because I've been part of your mastermind when I've been able to be in town and brought some people that I really think are really great leaders in our community. And can you talk a little bit about your mastermind and what that looks like?
The mastermind group that we did was a test group to see how it all worked. And that was a phenomenal experience. We had so many great moments in there and a couple big takeaways. Number one, leaders are lonely. And you say, how can leaders be lonely? They have department heads, they have families, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but nobody sits in that chair. And until you sit in that chair, you don't understand that. So to be able to bring a group of leaders together from various industries and sit them down and say, hey, here's a problem I'm having, and have other leaders work through that with them. So incredibly powerful.
Empowering.
Yeah.
Right to the E.
Yeah.
Straight to the E.
Capital E, E squared. But that was a huge lesson that leaders are lonely, got to provide a space that they can come and be vulnerable and share things. The second thing, my big takeaway from that, the second thing was leaders like to learn and work, but they also need that camaraderie. And that was kind of one of the takeaways that we left with, is they said, love the group, loved all this, but we needed to do more interpersonal things. So it all ties back to leaders are lonely. And so for me, a mastermind group provides that space to help cure leadership loneliness.
That's great.
Which I just coined that. So
Leadership loneliness. Yes. Go ahead and
we're going to
trademark
write that down.
it.
I'm going to trademark that. Don't beat me to it.
I'll make sure this doesn't get posted for a couple of months, so you get the trademark.
Good.
So the mastermind was a full 6 months, and you're going to be starting some more, right?
Yep. I'm looking to do another one here in the next few months, and it will be a 1-year commitment, because that was one of the things as we rounded up our last 6 months and I did my follow-up surveys with that original group. Everybody wanted it to be longer and do some more in-depth stuff. And so we're making some tweaks from that first group for the next group. Part of the next group will have a couple off-sites, and we'll do a retreat, a 3-day retreat that I think you do a lot of that. So you can validate me here and tell me I'm on the right track. But I think if you can bring a dispersed group of people together in an environment, a growth-oriented environment, magic can happen. Would you?
Absolutely. Yeah, you remove the environment, you cultivate the atrium for cultivation, right? So you bring them into a new space, different way of thinking, away from their phones, away from their computers, a lot of reflection and thinking and deep questioning and space.
Yeah.
It's an atrium for growth.
Yeah. And I'm really excited about bringing a mastermind group into that space, because that would be a group of people that have spent the last 6 months, being vulnerable, working through problems together, sharing highs and lows, so that you're bringing in this emotional tie to a space like that. I just can't wait to see what happens to the individuals from that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. And if you are interested and these will have to be face-to-face, right? So
this one will be a face-to-face one, yeah.
So this will be something for our community, for people that are interested and growth-minded and really want to level up. I can tell you it's not a group to join if you want to half-ass anything.
No, there's a serious time commitment. And in fact, that's one of the things everybody brought up, why they wanted it longer, because they didn't feel like it was long enough. And we met twice a month for an hour and a half to 2 hours at a time. So there's a serious time commitment, but everybody said it was well worth it, and we want more.
And we did find that even when I was traveling and you were traveling, it's not the same at doing this on Zoom or show. It's a nicer, more connected circle when you're face to face.
Correct. I think, and the next group I do will do a virtual one.
If everybody's
next
virtual,
year. Yeah.
that's
if
different.
everybody's virtual, I think, and you've got some experience with that, with that last emotional intelligence class you taught. But I think there's just some camaraderie that comes from the one that you can't get from the other, but there's space for both. You're right.
I think there is, but I think you either got to make it face to face or you make
can't do a hybrid.
You can't do the hybrid with this, because the container isn't as solid.
Correct. That's a really good way to put it. The container is not as solid.
Yeah. And so would you know when you'll be starting that?
My original thought was in the September timeframe. So I've got some things going on right now that may put that on hold a little bit, but we'll see.
Yeah. And so how would people know how to sign up for that?
Well, it will be by invitation only. And so in the short term, if you're interested and you listen to this podcast before I start sending out invitations, you can send me an email to my email address, just huff.jeff@gmail.com. Send me an email and say, hey, I'm interested. If you're in the Pocatello, Blackfoot area, let me know. But then what I'm looking to do is send out invitations to various businesses and say, hey, pick your one person that thinks that fits this criteria. And then we'll have an information meeting. You can come to that and go from there.
Awesome. That's great. So that's going to be a great resource for the community. And I was bummed that I didn't get to be here as much as I wanted to.
We missed you.
Yeah.
We missed you a lot.
Yeah. Well, I was happy that I got to participate as much as I did. And I think that anybody that joins a group like that will benefit and grow more than they would on their own.
You absolutely will. And I've really come to believe this over the last few months is you cannot be all you can be without a coach or without a group like this, because you just don't know what your blind spots are.
That's why they're blind spots.
Right. And I go back to one of the first experiences we had. We had a CEO of an organization that was growing rapidly, and they were concerned about making a management choice. And they had spent weeks agonizing over that, brought it to the group. We talked about it. He came up with a new strategy. He went out and implemented it. And he came back and he said, none of my fears held water. What we talked about here worked perfectly. The group even outperformed what I thought they would. Boom.
Yeah.
And that's the power of the mastermind group, just to help you understand where your blind spots are.
And give a bunch of different perspectives. That's what I found valuable. Not just a coach, but a bunch of different perspectives. Have you thought about this or this? And they ask a lot of questions, not telling you what to do. Have you thought about it from this frame? Or tell me more about this. And so one coach is great too, but in the mastermind, there was, when you're in the hot seat, you call it, right? That's when you're needing the help. And you volunteer to share what your challenge is and see if you can get some perspective from the others in the group. And I really loved getting in the hot seat.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hot, but it was fun.
Yeah. I think we're going to change the name from hot seat. That was one of the other takeaways is people didn't like being in the hot seat. So we're going to change that name a little bit, but that's,
I know you have some fun sayings like the cage
match.
Cage match, the hot seat.
I try to have some fun, but
I know, but some people don't like it. Some people aren't as fun as you.
No, so you just have to be willing to adjust and go. So
are you going to call it the squishy box?
That's what it is. It'll be the fluffy chair. You got the fluffy chair today.
No, I get that. Language has power for sure. And so if it does offend or it doesn't make people feel comfortable, it matters. But it's also fun to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously. So the mastermind is one of the things you're doing and moving forward, and then you're doing coaching. And what's your special interest as it relates to coaching? Are you wanting to coach people that are running for office, or what is your niche?
That's a really good question. And as I've thought about that a lot, I guess my niche, if I were to narrow it down, I love the peer-to-leader space, people that are brand new to leadership, which ties nicely into my political experience because you take some Joe off the street and now you put him in charge of a city or a county or whatever it may be. So those local level leaders that are newly elected, that would be the other part of my niche, to come in and sit down and help coach them to learn how to lead in those environments. So that peer-to-leader, which is a tough transition.
Yeah, enthusiasm doesn't equal competence.
No. And what you think you have in your mind of what things are going to be like does not look like it when you step into that.
Right,
So, but those would be the two, if I were to define it down as a narrow niche in the corporate world, it's the peer-to-leaders, those people that just moved, and in the political world, it's the newly elected leaders that, all right, I got elected now, how do I lead this thing?
Yeah, I love that. And if your experience is anything like mine, you'll start out coaching this person about leading in new leadership, but you'll find out that they've got other issues that always bubble up in the coaching. It always comes back to personal. It always comes back to self-limiting beliefs, and it always comes back to these constraints that are holding them back that they don't recognize. And
that's why because it's always about me. It's not about me, but it's all about me.
Right. And so I think people think when they get coaching that they're just going to, I've had people be afraid to talk about their personal stuff because they're like, well, work's paying for this, so I don't think that I should talk about my personal stuff when this is about work. But I'm like, but this thing is in your way that is following you everywhere you go, the whole person. This thing, this you not being enough problem, that stemmed back from here when you were a child is still showing up in your work, but it's showing up in your marriage, and it's showing up with your kids, and it's showing up in your job and everything else. And so you as a whole person, let's work on that so that you can be better in all these areas.
That's the big focus of the whole leader is I'm not going to teach you or work with you on your technical skills. I'm assuming you've been to school for that or whatever. I'm assuming you're technically competent. But what you're talking about is so true. It's the baggage that I bring to work every day impacts the decisions I make, how I handle my employees, my relationships, everything. And so like we talked about in the previous episode, if I can get to a point where I am at a blank slate and I'm not bringing any of that stuff with me and I can look at things as objective as possible, then I can be a good leader because I'm not saying, well, because that guy cut me off on the way he worked more this morning, I'm mad, I'm going to deny your request because I'm just in a bad mood. No. Okay. Boom.
Yeah.
It is all about, and I joke about it all the time, but it's so true. It's not about me, but it's all about me. And I have so many clients that go, we'll start down this path. Well, here's the problem. And we go down and then pretty soon they go, damn it, Hough, it's about me, isn't it? Yes, it is. Welcome to the party.
Everywhere you go, there you are.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the reality of it. Sometimes you notice that your relationships aren't doing well. You're not liking your work. You're struggling with your significant other, your kid relationships, your people you work with. There's a common denominator.
You.
And so if that hits, it's maybe the teacher is ready to appear. Like it's one of those things where when you start to feel that and you recognize that there's a problem and it might be you, then that opens the door for opportunity and possibility and change and growth and transformation and just, gosh, there's people out there that want to help you because that is like that's now where we're at in our life.
Yeah.
That is the soulful place where it's like, oh my gosh, the struggle is so hard. And if I could just give you a hand up and just like, let you see your value, let you see your worth, drop the baggage that you have, these beliefs that have served you for a while, but don't serve you anymore.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about this, how we just crave that deeper level conversation, that connection versus, what's the office gossip? I don't care. How are you doing? What's going on in your world?
Right.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah. And what's the meaning of life? And what's a meaningful life to you? And, how's your ego go? How's it popped up or shown itself? And,
right.
I love those kind of conversations and those are real, deeper, meaningful conversations. And some people are scared of that because there's a lot to face.
Yeah, there is. And it's scary to admit that you're not a perfect human.
Yeah.
Scares me to death all the time. That's why we have H for humble. You have to be willing to admit that I am not a perfect human.
Do you know that is one of the reasons that I really wanted to work with you from the get-go was your humility? And I know you're going to say, well, I didn't have it that much.
I didn't.
But you did. And I'm going to tell you how. And if you want me to cut this out, we can.
No.
But Liz, this is it.
I'm going to bare my soul to the world through Angie. Go ahead.
Yes. Here's exactly what you said to me. I'd like to get some coaching. And I've recognized some things about myself as we've gone through this training. And I'd like to be less passive aggressive.
It's true.
And I was like, what? Like, I had never had anybody be so direct about what you knew you wanted to work on. And you were this county commissioner, white male guy. You didn't fit any of the criteria that I thought would come to me and say I would want coaching, right? And so your humility was so human.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I think that we've connected on such a friend deep spiritual level, because all the other stuff is BS. The names, the titles, the positions, the stereotypes, anything that we live in, we've been able to cut that stuff aside and be like Jeff as a human, as an essence, as a being. I care about you, your soul, your family, your friend, you as a human being.
Yep.
And we had to cut away some of the societal stuff that comes with position and titles and just stereotypes in general.
Right.
Our biases
Mm-hmm.
that we think are true that aren't necessarily true.
True. Correct.
But the humility was actually, and that is actually something that attracts me to clients. So when you said it'll be by invitation only or something, what I love is when people reach out and they're like, I want to work on this. I know that I could use some help in this, or I'm not very good with difficult conversations. And I could use some help with public speaking, or I'd like to be better at this. When somebody just says that, of course, what do you want to do?
Right.
What do you want to do?
You want to reach out and say, how can I help?
How can I help? But I think for a lot of people, they're so afraid to be vulnerable to say, I'm struggling and I need some help.
Because we're supposed to be tough. We're supposed to have all the answers because we are adults.
Yeah.
Or we like to think we are, but you know, like I like to say, high school never ends.
Right.
There's no playbook, so just figure it out as you go.
Are you sick of the way things are going in your life? Are you going through some life quakes or some transitions that you could use some support through? Do you feel stuck, bored, stressed, overwhelmed? Could you use a pause to connect your heart, mind, spirit, and self? We know that feeling. We've been there before, and that's why we're offering a solution that we know has worked for us. It's a chance for you to pause and to reflect and to grow and to transition well. It's not something you do alone. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's a willingness to do things that are so important that they're worth doing, even and especially when you're feeling that fear. This Women's Lotus Retreat features a chance to be surrounded by people who are as motivated and as connected as you seek to be. You can expect to gain new skills, shift old mindsets, old habits, and ways of being that make you feel stuck. If you're looking for CEUs and a reason to ask for time off from work for professional development, this is an amazing opportunity awaiting you. Your investment and emotional enrollment in the process of development opens the doors for you to change and for change to happen in your life. It isn't easy, but it's simple. So my question to you is, will you enroll or walk away from this opportunity? And if not now, when? Treat yourself and register today with the link in the bio. We hope to see you there this September in beautiful Teton Valley, Idaho. Well, that was the realization that I had, as I thought I was misinformed that when I grew up and went to work in the operating room, I thought everybody would act like adults and professionals and everybody would just be like, get along. I don't know why I thought that, but I thought because they had education and they were, smart and they were highly trained, that everybody would actually perform really optimally at work and teams would function really well. And what I realized is people are really good at their technical skills.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They can do the surgery. They can fix the books. They can balance the budget. They can make the pizza. They can do whatever it is the tasks of the job call for. But we underinvest in soft skills and people and interpersonal skills and undervalue it.
Correct. We do. And I'm going to jump on the internet hater bandwagon, but I'm an internet junkie, but the internet has really fostered that because it has taken us away from the interpersonal relationships.
For sure.
Because you walk through any airport and what do you see?
Mm-hmm.
People just staring down. And so I've tried hard lately, which again, it's hard to put my phone away and walk around and be more present and pay attention to what's going on around me. And it's interesting what you can see and what you can notice.
Oh, it is.
When you do that.
People watching it. Oh my gosh.
And once you get past the Walmart people watching and really try to look at the person,
mm-hmm.
you can start to see the baggage they're carrying. Oh, and that breaks my heart sometimes. I don't even know this person, but I can see what they're carrying, and it just breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've often thought about taking a photo every time I see an entire family. I take a mental picture of the entire family sitting at dinner, staring at their phone, or being in the airport, or, like all of these missed opportunities. And I think about when that person passes on, or that person's no longer in your life, or, what kind of regrets will we have if we're wasting time not being with the people that we're with and being over here?
Well, how many times have you heard it? They interview people that have lived a long time right before they're dying. And, what's the most important thing you wish? Oh, I wish I'd have spent more time with my relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that matter the most. Yet social media, our phones have taken this away from that. So that what was supposed to be the great uniter has actually divided us.
And created, I've said this multiple times, it's more of a communication tool. It's not a connection tool. It's great to communicate some ideas or things or events that you have going. It's great for that, but it's not a substitute for connection, for eye contact, for having a conversation face to face. Even the mirror neurons that we see, like we mimic each other, like being around other humans, it makes you more connected. And even if you're an introvert, you still need to be in contact and in connection with people.
Yep.
You just need to pick your crowd.
Right. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, studying this, that, the old saying, you're the sum of the 6 people or 5 people you spend the most time with. And it's like, all right, how am I picking my crowd?
Yeah.
Who are my 5 or 6? And okay, maybe I have a 5 or 6 that are family.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's a 5 or 6 that are business or, outside of family.
And then maybe there's a couple of friends, vaults.
Right.
Right? Like a business community. And then you got to have a couple of vaults. And that could be a therapist, a coach,
Whatever.
I like them to have a little bit of professionalism, because a friend oftentimes gets emotionally involved in your stuff too.
Right. Absolutely. And again, we've talked about this before, and I think I mentioned it, but you can't get as far in life as you want to without a coach, because you can't see your blind spots. And it's always amazed me how the athletes all have a coach. The greatest athletes in the world have coaches, but yet do business leaders have coaches?
Some do. Well, they do in Fortune 500s.
Some of the big boys do.
Yeah. But it's not just a money thing. It's also a knowing that it's important.
Right.
It's a mindset.
Right. And no, if you really want to take your business to the next level, get a coach and spend some time working on yourself so you can see the picture clearly.
Yeah. So how did it feel the first time you spent money on yourself for coaching?
So hard to do. So hard to do. It was just hard. But then after a couple months, it was like, okay, I see this. And then the opportunity came when you and I went to attend the same class to get that coaching at the next level, which was a bigger investment. And that was easier, but the return was so huge. And I'm getting ready to make another investment to help my coaching and go to the next level. And so if you don't invest in yourself, what do you even invest in?
Well, and if you don't believe in yourself and investing in yourself, who else is going to believe in you?
Right. Who's going to invest in you? So.
Yeah. So you're preaching to the choir here. I struggled to pay for my own coaching the first time I decided to do coaching, and I felt embarrassed a little bit about getting coaching. Like, is there something wrong with me that I need coaching? Because this was a mindset, right? And so I had to overcome that mindset, which I did through coaching, but I recognized that it's not a weakness to ask for help.
No. And again, it shows strength to say, hey, I don't have all the answers. Can you help me? And you mentioned it earlier. We all have the answers that we need inside of us. Sometimes we just need help getting those answers out, which is where the coach comes in that can say, ask those probing questions, ask those, what I found, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you ask a question and somebody gives you the first answer, that's never really the real answer.
Yeah.
You got to go 2 or 3 more whys behind that to get to the real answer. Then you can solve the problem.
And a lot of the stuff that we talk about with our friends or just in acquaintance, when we're talking about stuff, we're really looking at the surface level of the symptom. I'm angry, I'm ticked off, they did this, they made me, whatever. This is the symptom. It's like the scab on your knee, right? It's like, we got a symptom here, but what's the actual root cause? And so it's diving down deeper and deeper and deeper and revealing that and just holding that space for that person to recognize that's where that came from. I've been seeing the world like this ever since that happened. And now I recognize, is that true? That's where
Right.
is that actually true? So sharing my own journey with you and you sharing yours with me, we recognized that we were kind of similar in the way that we didn't feel like we had value,
Right.
that we had worth, that we weren't wanted, or things like, things like that. And so those were mindsets that, followed us along in all of our relationships, in all of our work lives. And that paradigm that we were viewing the world through impacted the way we showed up. That we couldn't show up as our best selves if you don't think you're even worth anything.
Right. Well, I look to you for a lot of inspiration, and I look at the journey you've been on since we've known each other, and how you've slowly put that mindset away to go from I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough to heck yeah, I can. And look at where your business has gone. Look at where you've gone personally and professionally. And just that swing has been incredible to watch and to be a part of, and just to stand there and cheer and go Angie, this is fantastic. That's what this journey is all about. It's not about, I'm a CEO of the Fortune 500. Who cares? Because, as soon as you die or move on, somebody else will fill that seat. Who cares?
Yeah.
And you talk about all the time, ripples of impact. Your ripples of impact have gotten so much bigger since you put down that I'm not enough thought process. It's incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I couldn't have gotten here alone. I couldn't have gotten here alone. It took being vulnerable. It took investing in myself. It took sharing some really hard stuff, which I'm going to be sharing some of this stuff that I've worked through in my podcast now. I'm doing a lot more of my own one-on-ones, and I want to share that journey because I feel like I have a lot of wisdom that I can bring to the table. And I want to still have humility and be humble, but I also feel like there's part of that can connect with people because I know that I can connect with people if I share the story, and that they're there, and I'm ready when they're, even if they don't choose me, that's fine. That's why I have other coaches on here. That's why I have other leaders on here. I might not be for them, but if they hear it on my podcast and it helps plant a seed, and they can cultivate an idea that they have worth and they're worth investing in, and that they're their best investment internally. From the inside out. I'm not talking about investing in all of the things that are external, because society already pushes you towards what you drive, where you live, what you look like, what and especially women. I mean, beauty products, diet, you name it, you're marketed, you're not good enough, and your aging sucks. So that's going to be another episode.
That's a whole other story.
It's a whole nother episode. But
that's like a 3-part episode.
Yeah, but focus inside out. And this is that whole leader, whole person. And even if you don't consider yourself a leader, you're a whole person and you lead. Even if not by title, you lead a family, you lead at church, you lead in a community, you lead other people, and you have ripples of impact regardless of your title. And I will also say that oftentimes people on the other levels have more influence than the person with the title. Would you agree?
Well, all I know is you are watched everywhere. I'm amazed at kids that have come up to me in the past and say, hey, you inspired me to do this, or I saw you this post and I think that's really cool. And it's like, okay, I don't know who you are, but that's fantastic. I'm glad you were inspired. So if I can take care of myself and be the very best version of myself, then I can have the ripples of impact that I want in this world and leave the legacy that I want, which isn't my name on a building, but it's making lives better.
Yeah.
Because, and you know it as well as I do, when you're having those deep conversations with somebody and they think the problem is over here, and you finally get them to understand that the problem is here, and they go, I get it. And the light comes on and you feel that emotional shift, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And that's why we do this, for that moment when they go, I get it.
Yep. It's a sliding door moment, one of those game changers. You said you had a time on the treadmill where you came up with your own. What external quotes, coaching conversations, any interactions with someone else have come up where you just went, oh my gosh, that's it?
I'm so glad you asked. I hoped you would ask this question. This is the one question I prepped for, even though we didn't even talk about it. I've been prepping for bodybuilding shows, and I did one a year ago, and it was my first one. And my son, who's a professional trainer, lives in Phoenix, does a phenomenal job. He got me going on this first show, and about halfway through the preparation for that, we had a come to Jesus meeting, and he said, Dad, I don't want you putting my name on as your coach if you're not going to do this, if you're not going to do it right. I don't want it. I went, all right, I'll show you, you little punk, blah, blah, blah. All I wanted to do was, go from where I was, which was not great, to stand on stage. It's all I cared about. Mm-hmm. This time, Tucker, as my son, he'd been working on some stuff, and he'd upped his game with his coaching and his development and the program. He's developed a program that is fantastic. And so I started my program this time, and I was more committed because this time, the first time I just wanted to stand on stage. This year I said, I want to be competitive. Okay. So I went into it with a different mindset. Mm-hmm. Tucker comes in and he has a different process this year, and I'm following the process, and I'm doing good. I'm making great progress. I'm way ahead of where I was the previous year. Things were going well. And Tucker had a bodybuilding show for himself down in Phoenix, and it was about 3 weeks before my show. And he asked me if I'd come because he were driving to Vegas, and he didn't want to drive himself because anybody that's prepped for a bodybuilding show knows that last day or two, you're just not yourself. And so I said, I'll come drive. So as we're driving to Vegas, just the car, he and I, and we have a great relationship. And he said, so Dad, how serious are you with this program I've got you going on? I said, I think I'm probably 85% committed to everything that you've put down. I'm 85% there. And there was silence on the other side. And I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, he's tired, blah, blah, blah. So he goes to the show. He does a great job. Show's fantastic. He gets done with the show, and we go out for the post-show eat. And he said, you're not eating. And I went, okay, I'm prepared for that. That's fine. And while we're eating, he had some French fries. And I said, dude, can I have one French fry? I just got to try that because it looks really good. Yep. So we get home later that night, and we're out walking, and he lights into me. And I mean, gives me a dressing down like an Army drill sergeant. Okay. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. You're not committed. I see all these things, blah, blah, blah. I told you weren't eating, and you asked for a French fry. You're 3 weeks out from a show, and you're asking for a French fry. I went, dude, it's a French fry. He said, you are not committed. You told me yourself you're 85%. I said, but I'm successful. I'm ahead of where I was at. I'm ready. And he said, are you? And when he said that, are you, that hit. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, I think I am. And we kept going a little bit more. And he said, have you ever been 100% committed to anything in your life? And I'm like, ouch, dude. Okay, I can think of maybe one thing. And he said, but I've been successful. So I start throwing up all these excuses. I've been successful. I've done this. And he just looked at me and said, have you? Well, there's this knife in my back, son. You want to get that out? And he said, no, I'm going to leave it. And so I'm getting ready to leave the next day. And I said, you know what, Tuck? Thank you for that gift. He said, that was a gift? I said, yeah, it was. And I said, I tell you what, I'm going to be 100% committed for the next 3 weeks. And I had a mind shift occur at that moment. And so for the next 3 weeks, I was 100% on my food, meaning I was not off a gram on any of my food. I hit all of my weight goals. I hit all of my cardio goals. I hit everything for 3 weeks to prove to myself that I could be 100%. And I stood on stage, and I was in such good shape, so much better shape than I was last year. Mm-hmm. And when I walked off stage, it was like, the world is mine now. Mm-hmm. I understand what commitment looks like, what commitment to the process looks like, what surrendering to the process looks like. And that changed me. Mm. That conversation from a coach who was my son, which throw that part out, but just from a coach, because and he and I have had a coach-son relationship off and on throughout our years together. So I was able to separate the son from my coach. And so I took it from my coach and it changed me. And it has had, and it will have lifelong impact. That one conversation about, are you committed?
That is so good. Oh man. You're out of the mouths of babes.
Amen. And he mic dropped and walked away. Just left me sitting there just,
That is so amazing. You have great kids. I mean, I get to hear the stories sometimes about your kids and your grandkids, and that's another area that I feel like you have a strength in is going through challenges with kids, and if somebody was struggling with their adult kids or things like that, I really feel like that's another gift that you have, that you've been through, and you've even offered me advice on certain things, and you can't really empathize with people if you haven't been through some tough stuff. And I think that's one of the areas. Yeah, you're a great leader, but as a human being, you've been through some difficult things. You've overcome your own obstacles. You've learned why you do the things you do, and decided if they're serving you anymore. You're open and willing to change and all the things. I see you as a whole leader because I've been part of the journey. I've got to watch it. I have no hesitations of sending coaching clients your way. If you know somebody that's running for office, if you know somebody that's new leadership, you know somebody that's struggling with their adult children, you know somebody that wants to bodybuild and needs to change their mindset, or an athlete mindset. I mean, it's really a mindset makeover.
I enjoy the title you gave me. You gave yourself for your position, and so I gave myself a title, and I call myself the mental locksmith.
I love it.
I'm helping people remove the mental barriers that are standing in their way of getting where they want to go.
I love that. So we all have that, but the key is being humble enough to admit it and to ask for help. So if people want to find you, they could find you on social media and on jeffhough.com.
Right now, the best place to find me, I'm switching some things over to my new business, and I was so excited when I found this name. But my new business is Apatheia. The website is apatheiallc.com, and apatheia means living at peace and not being influenced one way or the other. It's just kind of living at peace. And so if you want to find me, that's a great spot. Or you can always drop me an email at hough.jeff@gmail.com, and we'll go from there. But
yeah, absolutely. If you can get into a mastermind or get in a coaching session or just see what other ways that Jeff might be able to help you, I guarantee you won't regret it.
I would be willing to bet I get to hear a "damn it, Hough" out of you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, and thanks for just all the ripples of impact you're creating.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the ripples of impact that you've had on my life as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for listening to the Leader You podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, meaningful, if it hits your soul, please like it, subscribe it, and share it. There's probably people in your life that could stand to use and hear this message.
Is the like button up over here?
Yes, it's over here. Like it. Thank you. Have a great day.